Good research. Yeah, no, I was tending a bar, and there were a couple friends of mine, and they came into the bar one night, and they had...
Bruce Willis's story is one of brilliance, rebellion, triumph, and ultimately tragedy. Shaped by his meteoric rise to fame, his defiance of Hollywood's power structures, and the cruel progression of a devastating illness that would eventually strip away everything that made him the iconic figure the world adored. By the time he reached his 70th birthday, in March 2025, his family revealed what fans had long feared. Willis could no longer speak, read, or walk. The final stages of his battle with frontotemporal dementia. The man who once embodied indestructible heroes on screen now stood powerless against a disease that offered no victories. But the roots of this decline, at least in the public's imagination, reach back over 3 decades earlier to a single decision that altered the trajectory of his career: his determination in 1991 to take control of his own creative vision with the film Hudson Hawk. At the dawn of the 1990s, Bruce Willis was untouchable. His first 2 Die Hard films had cemented him as one of the biggest action stars in Hollywood, and he was commanding salaries of $15 to $20 million per movie, at a time when such figures were reserved for the absolute elite. Studios scrambled to attach him to blockbuster projects, eager to cash in on his mix of charm, ruggedness, and everyman appeal. But Willis harbored ambitions that extended far beyond being a hired gun. From his bartending days in New York, he had nurtured the idea of a film based on a quirky cat burglar who sang while working, a concept he co-developed with his friend Robert Kraft. That dream project became Hudson Hawk. And for Willis, it was an opportunity not just to star, but to shape the creative process itself. He co-wrote the story, hired director Michael Lehman, brought in screenwriter Daniel Waters, and soon assumed near-total control of the production once filming began in Italy. He altered dialogue, gave direction to fellow actors, and treated the studio's money as if it were his own, ballooning the budget from an initial $42 million to a staggering $70 million. When Hudson Hawk opened in May 1991, the result was disastrous. Audiences ignored it, and critics savaged it, with Rolling Stone calling it unspeakably awful, and the New York Times branding it colossally sour and ill-conceived. It ended up losing an estimated $90 million. On the surface, it was simply a high-profile flop. But beneath the surface, in the boardrooms of Hollywood, the film represented something much more alarming to executives: the specter of a star seizing too much control. Willis had dared to blur the lines between performer and creator, threatening the tightly guarded hierarchy that kept actors dependent on the system. Almost overnight, his reputation shifted. Once known as bankable and reliable, he was suddenly whispered about as difficult to work with. The truth of that label mattered less than its utility as a tool for punishment. Within months, doors that had been wide open to him began to quietly close. Producer Joel Silver, once Willis's greatest ally and the man behind his Die Hard success, began to distance himself. Other powerful figures followed suit. The industry made an example of Willis. Crossing the line of creative autonomy would not be tolerated. The whispers spread through agents' calls and executives' lunches, eroding his opportunities project by project. By the end of 1991, Willis had gone from being one of Hollywood's most bankable stars to something like persona non grata. Even the franchise that had made him a household name, Die Hard, looked ready to move on without him. During the pre-production of Die Hard with a Vengeance in 1993, Willis discovered he wasn't automatically included, as producers sought to hire new leadership unburdened by obligations to him. The implicit message to other actors was chilling. Rebel against the machine, and you'll not just lose jobs, you'll lose your legacy. Yet Willis refused to retreat quietly. he publicly insisted he was more interested in being an interesting actor than in chasing box office figures, remarks that only reinforced Hollywood's determination to punish him. The financial toll grew. By the mid-1990s, instead of commanding record salaries, Willis found himself taking supporting roles in ensemble projects or gambling on mid-tier thrillers. His output was inconsistent. Hits like 12 Monkeys and The Fifth Element showcased his undeniable talent, while flops such as Striking Distance and Color of Night suggested a career struggling for direction. The days when his mere presence guaranteed a hit were gone. The nadir of his mid-career struggles came in 1997 with Broadway Brawler, a romantic comedy that fell apart in production after Willis reportedly dismissed much of the crew, including the director and cinematographer. Disney, having lost $17 million, sued him. To settle, Willis agreed to star in 3 Disney films at drastically reduced salaries, among them Armageddon and The Sixth Sense. Ironically, both would become career-defining successes, with The Sixth Sense reminding audiences of his dramatic depth. But even these triumphs could not fully erase the industry's lingering perception that Willis was dangerous, a star willing to derail projects in pursuit of his vision. The reputation stuck, and studios approached him with caution, even as his films grossed billions worldwide. As the 2000s and 2010s unfolded, Willis's career entered another phase. He remained a recognizable star, but his projects became uneven, oscillating between big-budget action films and smaller, forgettable productions. By the mid-2010s, something else was happening. Something more troubling than just career decline. Willis began appearing in a flood of low-budget direct-to-video films, often shot in just days, with his face dominating posters, even though his actual screen time was minimal. These so-called geezer teasers, produced by Randall Emmett, and EFO Films, exploited the reputations of aging stars to sell cheaply made movies to international distributors. Willis would be paid $2 million for 2 days of work, his scenes shot in isolation under restricted schedules. Fans noticed the decline in quality, but few realized it reflected more than cynicism in Hollywood accounting. On set, disturbing details emerged. Willis needed cue cards and earpieces for simple lines. Directors cut his dialogue and limited his workdays. He appeared confused, disoriented, even unsure of his surroundings. To those paying attention, it was obvious something was very wrong. Still, the production machine rolled on, churning out dozens of low-quality films that tarnished his legacy while extracting maximum profit from his name. Even the Golden Raspberry Awards joined the ridicule, creating a special category in 2022 for Worst Performance by Bruce Willis in a 2021 movie, before hastily retracting it when his diagnosis came to light. That revelation came in March 2022, when Willis's family released a joint statement announcing he had been diagnosed with aphasia, a condition that robs individuals of their ability to understand or express language. The diagnosis explained everything: the reliance on cue cards, the reduced shooting schedules, the struggles with even basic communication. Fans and colleagues responded with heartbreak, realizing that the decline they had witnessed was not laziness or disinterest, but the symptom of a serious neurological disorder. His family revealed that they had initially attributed changes in his speech to stress or the remnants of his childhood stutter, not recognizing the severity until it became undeniable. By February 2023, the family returned with even grimmer news. Willis's condition had progressed into frontotemporal dementia, a cruel disease that attacks behavior, personality, and language. Unlike Alzheimer's, it does not begin with memory loss, but instead strips away the very qualities that defined Willis as an actor: his wit, timing, and charisma. There was no cure, no treatment, and no way to slow its progress. The average life expectancy after diagnosis was 7 to 13 years, a heartbreaking prognosis for a man in his late 60s. Still, Willis continued appearing in films as his handlers fulfilled existing contracts, sparking uncomfortable questions about how much he had truly consented to these late career projects. By early 2025, his condition had worsened dramatically. A video posted by his wife, Emma Hemming Willis, showed him frail and confused as he attempted to thank firefighters battling California wildfires. He struggled to form words, and his family spoke on his behalf. It was the first time the public had seen him since his dementia diagnosis, and the change was shocking. The vibrant, wisecracking star who had once dominated screens seemed almost unrecognizable, reduced to a shell of the man he had been. In March 2025, Willis turned 70. Surrounded by his family, his wife, his ex-wife, Demi Moore, and his daughters, he celebrated quietly. Photos showed him smiling, but his eyes vacant. The celebration was no longer about him so much as for his family, a way to mark the passage of time as they grieved the gradual disappearance of the man they loved. By July of that year, reports emerged that Willis could no longer speak, read, or walk, his dementia advancing faster than anyone had predicted. The man who had once performed his own stunts crawled barefoot across broken glass as John McClane saved the world in Armageddon and brought audiences to tears in The Sixth Sense, was now completely dependent on others for basic daily functions. The irony was devastating. Willis had built his career on playing resilient underdogs who faced impossible odds and always found a way to win. John McClane improvising his way out of terrorist plots. Corbin Dallas saving the universe with nothing but grit and humor. Malcolm Crowe gently guiding a terrified child even after death. These characters embodied resilience, courage, and cleverness. But in real life, Willis faced an enemy with no weak points, no escape routes, no final twist to turn the tide. Frontotemporal dementia is merciless, stripping away its victims piece by piece until nothing remains. For Willis, it was the cruelest fate imaginable, to lose not just his career, but the very essence of communication, expression, and personality. Looking back, his story feels like a long, tragic arc. The rebellion that began in 1991 with Hudson Hawk marked him forever as a risk in Hollywood's eyes, leading to decades of uneven opportunities and lingering whispers of unreliability. Yet that same defiance, that unwillingness to bow to the system, was also what made him such a compelling actor, imbuing his performances with a spark of authenticity that audiences could feel. For years, Hollywood sought to punish him, but in the end, it was not the industry that broke him. It was his own mind. And now, as he lives out his final years surrounded by family, Bruce Willis stands as both a cautionary tale and a testament, a man who fought to control his destiny, only to face an opponent no one can defeat. By 2025, Bruce Willis's silence speaks louder than any line he ever delivered. His rebellion is over. His words are gone. His body is failing. Yet for millions of fans, the memory of his performances, his smirk, his sarcasm, his grit, remains indestructible. In the cruel arithmetic of dementia, his life has been stripped of language, movement, and independence. But in cinema, he will always be the wisecracking underdog who refused to quit. That is the paradox of Bruce Willis's story. Even as the disease erases him in life, his legacy on screen ensures that he will never truly disappear. What makes Bruce Willis's journey so haunting is the sharp contrast between his screen persona and his real-life decline. For decades, audiences celebrated him as the quintessential everyman action hero, the guy who wasn't larger than life like Schwarzenegger or Stallone, but rather a regular man caught in extraordinary circumstances who somehow found the courage to endure. That relatability was key to his appeal. John McClane wasn't bulletproof or superhuman. He was sarcastic, tired, bruised, and bleeding. Yet he kept pushing forward. People saw themselves in him, and it created a bond between Willis and his audience that was unlike anything Hollywood had manufactured before. Watching that very same figure lose the ability to walk, talk, or even recognize his surroundings adds a painful layer of irony. The character who symbolized resilience against impossible odds is now trapped in a battle no amount of grit or determination can overcome. This cruel twist of fate has also sparked broader conversations about Hollywood's relationship with its stars, particularly those who age or become vulnerable. For years, Willis's declining health was an open secret on film sets, whispered about by crew members and directors who witnessed his struggles firsthand. Yet instead of intervention, exploitation prevailed. Producers saw a way to make millions from his name while offering him only the barest minimum of involvement. The so-called geezer teaser phenomenon became a factory of diminishing returns, tarnishing Willis's reputation in the public eye and masking the seriousness of his illness. It raises uncomfortable questions. Who knew, and when? Should someone have stepped in sooner to protect him? And how many of those films exist not as creative works, but as evidence of a system willing to squeeze every last dollar out of a fading star? For Willis's family, the journey has been both public and private, filled with the dual challenges of managing a devastating illness and navigating the glare of celebrity culture. Emma Hemming Willis has often spoken candidly about the emotional toll, acknowledging that caregiving can feel isolating and overwhelming. Demi Moore, his former wife, has re-entered the picture not as an ex, but as a co-parent and ally, uniting the blended family in a show of solidarity. His daughters have used social media to share updates, not as publicity, but as a way of preserving their father's dignity in the face of relentless public curiosity. These moments, birthday celebrations, candid photographs, videos of quiet family gatherings, serve as reminders that behind the headlines and speculation is a husband, father, and friend who remains deeply loved, even as the disease erases the man he once was. Yet even in decline, Willis's legacy continues to ripple outward. Younger generations, discovering Die Hard, The Fifth Element, or The Sixth Sense for the first time on streaming platforms, are struck by the charisma and authenticity he brought to the screen. Critics have begun reassessing his career, noting the risks he took with unconventional projects and the range he demonstrated in balancing comedy, action, and drama. For all the talk of his battles with Hollywood's power structure, there is also admiration for the way he insisted on pursuing his creative vision, even when it came at great cost. In retrospect, Hudson Hawk looks less like a vanity project and more like the bold, if misguided, experiment of an artist unwilling to settle for predictability. The tragedy of Bruce Willis is not just that he lost his words, his mobility, and his independence, but that the decline happened in full view of the world. Few people have their most vulnerable years scrutinized by millions of strangers, dissected in tabloids, or mocked by award shows. And yet, perhaps because of that visibility, his illness has also created a wave of awareness around aphasia and frontotemporal dementia. Families affected by these conditions have spoken of finding strength in the Willis family's openness, grateful that such a high-profile figure has brought attention to diseases that are often misunderstood or overlooked. In this way, even in silence, Willis continues to give something to his fans: connection, recognition, and a reminder of shared humanity. As he fades from public life, what remains is the body of work. Decades of performances that continue to inspire, entertain, and comfort. Whether he was crawling through air ducts in Die Hard, navigating cosmic chaos in The Fifth Element, or quietly listening to a child whisper, "I see dead people." In The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis gave audiences something rare: characters who were flawed, funny, brave, and profoundly human. That humanity is what people will hold on to long after dementia has taken the man himself. His story may end in silence, but his legacy will speak forever.